Watcher is the debut feature from director Chloe Okuno about an American woman living in Romania who feels she is being stalked by a neighbour across the street. We talk about the themes of the film, the numerous tense sequences, how the language barrier enhances the main character's isolation, and maybe a few silly things along the way. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim. I've got a feeling I'm being watched right now.
Hell yeah. Super funny.
Yes, this is a horror movie podcast. We get together and we talk about a movie. It's that simple. It's October. We're trying to do as many episodes as we can, which I think is working out to about 2 a week. Which versus 2 a month is quite a big increase, you know. So
there you go. Yeah.
So yes, welcome. We're going to be talking about Watcher today, which is a movie that kind of I don't know if it's a Shudder exclusive, but it sort of went straight to Shudder. Starring Maika Monroe. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but she was the lead in It Follows, which is, I'll just say it, the best horror movie this side of the century. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's my favorite horror movie since 2000. I think that's an extreme statement to make, but
it's definitely up there.
What's your pick, the boy?
I don't know. I'd have to sit down and really think about it. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but
I'm pretty sure
it'd be up there for me.
I'm pretty sure both Lep and the Hood movies were both after 2000. They probably count for you as well.
Yeah.
See, I knew it. So she's the main recognizable face here. There is actually another recognizable actor as well in kind of a mysterious role. So I'm going to save talking about them until spoilers. We will start spoiler free as we always do. The premise of the film is that Maika Monroe plays this character named Julia, who moves with her husband to Romania, where his family's from, because he's got a job promotion. So she's kind of, it's kind of like it reminded me a little bit of the American version of The Grudge, where Sarah Michelle Gellar, who by the way was in the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you remember,
which featured
a lot of different things. Why?
A Watcher.
Oh yeah, very good. Is this guy on the Watchers Council? Do you think? Do you think he's got?
He's got to be
all the paperwork. Yeah, okay.
He sucks, so he definitely has to be.
He wasn't wearing enough tweed. All the Watchers on Buffy wear tweed.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's the thing. But so she's kind of this like fish out of water, where she's feeling very lonely because she doesn't speak the language, and she's constantly feeling alienated by their surroundings because her husband can speak the language. Her husband's fluent and is constantly getting into conversations with people in front of her because the people either prefer to speak in Romanian or can't speak English, and she's constantly feeling kind of alone even though she's surrounded by people. And so that's kind of one of the big themes of the movie. But in their apartment, they've got these big windows, and she kind of notices someone across the street just looking out their window, right? And at first it's like, oh, maybe he's just, looking from window to window. He's been nosy and looking around. No big deal. But then, of course, it becomes more and more like, is he looking at me? Is he staring at me? Is he watching me? to use the title of the movie. So, and there's also stories of killings happening in the city. So that's also sort of tagged onto it. So that's the basic premise. It's kind of her becoming paranoid and thinking she's being watched. And that's not to suggest that she isn't. I'm just like, but definitely one of the things that it plays with is like, maybe she is stressed, maybe she's feeling lonely, maybe she's starting to invent some kind of story in her head. So
she's a hysterical woman.
Well, I think that's kind of one of the themes that the movie's getting at, is the way that her husband doesn't write her off immediately.
A lot of people,
but
they kind of just write it off, like, I think there's there are points where like, he's watching me, and they're like, well, maybe he thinks you're watching him, which is like, it's very like gaslighty.
It kind of is, but the funny thing is that it kind of like plays in such a way where as the audience you go, it's not entirely possible that he's only staring now because you keep staring at him. and maybe that's why, obviously the movie presents like a horror movie where it's creepy and it's kind of intimidating, but like, is this a misreading? Is that what the real horror of this is going to be? Is it psychological, or is it simply, no, he is doing this and everyone's rationalizing it away and to an extent gaslighting her, and treating her like she's some crazy woman and just being hysterical or whatever. So that's the gist of the film. So I will now ask Tim for his basic thoughts on Watcher.
I'm sorry, Pete, but my thoughts are anything but basic. So I was pretty hyped going into this. I really didn't know anything about it other than it had been getting some good buzz, and I do like Maika Monroe. I say Maika mine Maika when in terms of when I'm watching a movie.
Make me a Maika.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'll go to the movie theater and they'll ask me what movie I want to see, and I'll tell them, well, make a mine a Maika, and they kind of just look at me for a while, and then they'll take the person behind me in line.
I love how you're referencing I can't even remember what product it is. It's Make Mine a. What was that from?
Oh, I don't know.
That's a slogan. It's Make Mine a something. So it's definitely like a catchphrase for a product. But
make mine an Apple computer.
I don't think it was, but nice try. I think what's funny to me about the way you're saying that is that it almost sounds like you're doing like an Italian accent as you're saying it. Make a mine a like Mario and Luigi are really insistent that they want Maika Monroe in their movies.
Well, Mario only goes to the castle because he thinks that it's Maika Monroe that's in trouble. When he sees this Princess Peach, he's like, oh.
Can't wait to hear Chris Pratt voice that very scene.
Yeah, weren't we supposed to get an update or something about that soon? I thought they said something in the Nintendo Direct that something was coming. Like,
I don't know. Like, I give a shit.
Hey, we might have to do it on the show. If King Koopa, it can be kind of scary. Okay, so what were we talking about?
Watcher.
Oh yes, The Watcher.
Not The Watcher. That's a different movie that's coming out in like a couple of months.
Who watches The Watcher? That's what I want to know. Also, this would make a great double feature with the movie Men. You'd be like, hey, what are you watching? Watchermen. You mean Watchmen? No, Watchermen. All right. So you're watching the movie Watchmen? No.
This is very convoluted. This is very convoluted because you would say I'm watching Watcher and Men.
That's not how I say it. When
no, you don't condense that.
Movies.
When you're watching two movies back to back, you don't say, "Oh, I'm watching Jaws Terminator." You don't say that.
People might. Some people might.
Who are these people?
Who are these people? All right, anyway, so I was pretty excited for this movie, and I'm especially excited because it's October and we're watching the movies that love to give us chills. That's kind of the tagline for our show. We watch the movies since October.
This is episode 517 or something like that. You're hitting me with this shit.
Well, it's time we got a catchphrase, and our catchphrase is we love to watch the movies that give us chills.
That make us give us chills. Is that the exact word you want on the t-shirt?
That is honestly, I would wear a t-shirt with pride if it had that slogan on it.
All right, what's your thoughts on the movie, Tim?
So as I was watching it, I was like, okay, I'm seeing some characters, I'm seeing some story unfold, and
yes, that's how movies typically work. Yes.
So I gotta say, I thought it was okay. I don't know. I feel like I think a lot of people, or at least like from what I've seen, the chatter online, I think a lot of people quite like this and are pretty happy with it. So I don't know if I'm gonna maybe get some shit for not being like totally in love with it, but I thought it was just okay. It definitely did some things well. Like I think there were some legitimately like creepy scenes when, like you're getting these scenes of watching someone watching you, and kind of it does a good job of like expanding on that paranoia. And so there's some like generally tense scenes, but it's definitely a slow burn movie. And there were times when I felt it, and I got a little bored here and there. Not to the point where I'm like, oh, this movie sucks, I can't wait for it to end. But just like every now and again, I'm like, all right, let's get to some watching. Give me something that's gonna make me give me the chills. as I always say when I'm watching these movies.
As you always say, as you, it's not like you just made that up 5 minutes ago for the first time ever in your life.
But yeah, no, I mean, I guess I'm a little bit in the middle. I don't think it was bad. I thought, the actors gave pretty good performances. If not the characters, I thought were a little bland. Like the guy that plays the Watcher, I thought was great. He was, very legitimately creepy, and I like the ending of the movie. I thought was pretty good, and had some good stuff happen that we'll talk about in spoilers. And there was some good legitimately weird or creepy tense scenes, but there's just some stuff in between where I got a little bored, and I don't know, the characters weren't like super exciting, but I don't know. I don't want to be too harsh because again, I still think it was an enjoyable movie, so it's kind of where I land.
Okay.
You can go now.
I think this is a promising director from this movie. There's a lot of really well handled moments where someone's behind her, or she's looking over her shoulder, or there's just the slow turn or something. Like, there's a lot of good little directorial moments in this. I think generally speaking, it's a pretty decent movie. That's this, the way I'd sort of describe it is that I don't think it ever quite finds a spark that it goes into great territory, and it never quite gets there for me. I think because despite as well directed as some of the moments are, some of the set piece moments, maybe it is that I just never quite get into the characters to the extent that I should for a movie of this type. Maybe it's because despite the fact that they did their best for it to feel different and not feel bogged down by it, we're still kind of doing the trope of the husband doesn't believe that something's going on. Usually it's supernatural stuff. In this case it's not, and I get that that's kind of the point of the movie, is that she's not being believed, and that's kind of what it wants to play with. But it is also a tired horror movie trope that I'm very tired of, and I would say that here it does okay with it. I wasn't finding myself getting too grumpy with it, because it kind of it didn't go through the usual things where he instantly starts saying, "Oh, you're imagining things," or that. He takes it seriously up until it's she's acting kind of too extreme for it, and then it kind of becomes something else, and then it becomes more like gaslighting or sort of writing it off or whatever. But so no, I'd say I guess I'm kind of similar, and I'd say I'm pretty positive overall. I don't know if it's left me thinking that I'll watch it again per se though.
Sure.
But I do think there's some good moments. I do agree with the actor who plays the Watcher, the titular Watcher. And who watches the Watcher? Well, that's easy. Maika Monroe's watching the Watcher, watching her.
That's true.
And she's watching him. And it's a snake. It just goes infinitely.
A lot of watching.
Back and forth. It's just that watching. So, So I think it's very watchable. It's a solid. As far as straight to streaming movies go, this is a very solid movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, very fair point. If you put in the pantheon of, I love Shudder, but I mean, come on, a lot of the Shudder originals are not always the best.
What's that movie called? Open House? The Netflix one.
Oh, about the open house. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Compared to that, this looks like Citizen Kane compared to that damn thing.
For sure.
This actually feels like there's a strong directorial style. It feels like someone's really trying to say something with the scares, and sort of, if nothing else, share the experience that the main character is going through of feeling alienated and isolated and alone, both through the being watched, but also the having no one to turn to. Because the whole point of this is that, it's trying to get across that feeling turned up to 11, that when a woman does feel in danger, she might not feel she has anyone she can turn to. Either because they won't take her seriously, or because they'll ignore her, or for whatever reason, right?
And especially being in, it's just compounded by, being in a strange foreign land. Well, I shouldn't say strange. I mean, just, unfamiliar to her, where, if you don't speak the language, that's just an extra layer of kind of helplessness that you have. Yeah,
there's multiple scenes where someone gets mad at her and yells at her in Romanian, and she just kind of has to say, sorry, don't speak Romanian, and just walks away slowly. So there's this constant thing, and obviously the movie doesn't translate the Romanian for you because it wants you to feel like her. It wants you to be in the dark with her and learn things the way she does.
Well, joke's on the movie, because I speak perfect Romanian.
Oh, do you now, Tim?
Yeah. Or should I say yeah?
Would you care to, I don't know, why don't you read us some famous movie quotes, but in Romanian? Why don't you give us the Romanian of, let's say, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Why don't you give us that in Romanian?
No. No, I will not.
Well played. Well played. I guess it'll remain a mystery if Tim can actually speak Romanian or not.
There'll be we'll set a large Patreon tier where I'll speak it to you. I'll call you up and tell you some stuff.
Is your plan that it'll take so long that you've got time to learn Romanian between now and then?
Maybe.
Can't read comic books anymore. You have to read how to learn Romanian every night for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah. So I think it's a solid enough movie. It's kind of frustrating in a weird way because I think there's moments of greatness and there's like a lot of things I like about it. Obviously, it's hard not to think a little bit about Rear Window at times because of all the watching, across apartments.
Yeah. I mean, I've never actually seen Rear Window, but I mean, like, obviously, I know a lot, like, through pop culture, obviously, but I mean, even without having seen the movie, I did still kind of get like Hitchcock vibes from this.
Yeah, which in a way could be a compliment to the director. Like, hey, I was feeling some Hitchcock stuff in this.
Hertzcock.
That wasn't making fun of Hitchcock. That was Herzog, Werner Herzog.
Yeah, it was close enough.
It turned into Herzog.
Yeah.
That was like the last one we recorded, Tim. How bad is your memory?
I mean, it was still funny. Who cares? Everyone's laughing. Everyone that's listening laughed a lot. Still laughing. Give them a moment.
I want receipts. I want receipts for this laughter. Have you ever seen that clip of The Big Bang Theory where they've taken away the canned laughter? There's all these awkward pauses after everything.
Oh, I mean, as soon as you said, "Have you seen that clip of The Big Bang Theory?" I was gonna stop you and say, "No, I have not." But actually, I think I have seen that, and yeah, it is unsettling. Yes,
it's very weird. Yes, it'd be really odd if we suddenly started like leaving these pauses after every time you think you're funny for the audience to laugh.
I just worry about the safety of some of our listeners. They could be operating heavy machinery, and then they laugh so hard that they drop a bunch of steel beams on a little kid or something.
Oh yeah. I'm sure we're very popular in the work site where they're working forklifts and cranes and bulldozers. Because I'm pretty sure that everything going on there is so noisy that you wouldn't even be able to hear us through your earphones.
Well, I mean, nowadays people have implants and stuff that they can just pipe podcasts right into your brain.
I didn't realize we were in a cyberpunk future already that Tim seems to think we're in.
Well, some parts of America. You know what I thought would be funny is, like a lot of times, like in America, like they'll have a movie that's set in like Savannah, Georgia, but then like they actually filmed it in like Romania or something because they get a tax break or whatever. I thought it'd be funny if this movie, even though it takes place in Romania, was actually like filmed in like Tucson, Arizona or something.
I have no idea. She does go into like a fancy museum looking place at one point, and I assume that seems like they had to go somewhere for that, but
oh yeah, I think that was actually the Romanian Museum of Agriculture, if I remember correctly. That's I know a lot about museums.
Apparently. So this is where we learn Tim's got a lot of tricks up his sleeve, speaking Romanian, in-depth knowledge of museums.
That's right, mon ami.
Can sense from the future that the audience is laughing when they're listening to the podcast.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone is like so damn excited that Wolverine is going to be in Deadpool 3. And I know for a fact that you leapt out of your chair when you heard that news, but don't you think it would have been even cooler if they said that Gambit was gonna be in Deadpool 3. Would you have done like a cartoon thing where like your eyes like bulge out of your head and like you fall backwards in your chair?
I don't know if you know this about me, Tim, but I don't really like Gambit all that much.
What? What?
He's kind of lame.
That's shocking.
He's just pretty lame. He's
What?
Yeah.
Oh, I just assumed by your, general kind of look that, that you were a fan.
I don't know what that means.
You look like Gambit is all I'm saying.
How do I look at Gambit? Gambit's got this. First of all, he's got a full head of hair, and he's got this like weird like headband sort of back support thing on. Like what about Gambit?
That is funny that they never mention his like back brace that he's wearing. I guess all the throwing those cards can kind of wear you out.
Oh, is that right? Is that right? Okay.
Deadpool 3 coming soon. So funny. I just know in my heart of hearts that Deadpool's gonna have so many funny Disney jokes. It's just like it, and I'm so glad it's happening. You have no idea.
That sounds a little disingenuous to me, Timothy.
I swear, if Deadpool looks at the camera and calls himself a Disney princess, I'm gonna lose it. It's gonna be so good. Oh my god. I have to do it on the show, probably.
What? Why?
What? What?
It's a horror movie podcast. We've went over this numerous times.
Well, you never know. Maybe the third Deadpool movie, maybe they're going to try to pivot to horror.
I'm not anticipating it, but I mean, if that's the way the cards are dealt, maybe we'll...
See, look, you even talk like Gambit, like how the cards are dealt. Dear Lord.
He has a very specific accent. I don't think I talk anything like Gambit.
We'll see.
It's a very, 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 very important point when it comes to Gambit. All right, can we talk about Watcher, please?
Yes, please. Go on. Jeez.
Shall we just give the spoiler warning now? Like, I mean,
sure. I think we talked about Deadpool enough to go into spoilers now.
I think we talked about Deadpool enough to go into spoilers now.
So you're always dubious about like if the people listening are laughing, but you're freaking laughing. Like,
if I was to make a guess on one of the phrases spoken on this episode of Screams After, or any episode of Screams After Midnight for that matter, the phrase "we've talked about Deadpool enough, it's time for spoilers" is not one I would have called.
Oh man, that'd be another great T-shirt. I'd wear that as well.
All right, let's talk in depth about Watcher then. Spoilers ahead for everyone who is concerned. All right. So, I mean, I like the opening titles. It did this thing where when they finally get to their apartment, there's a scene in the taxi that kind of sets up the language barriers and stuff. But when they get to the apartment, they start like getting frisky on the couch because they're finally settling in after the plane ride and everything. And the camera just slowly pulls back from this giant window where clearly anyone who wanted to watch could watch, and
including us,
and the credits just sort of play over that. I thought it was effective. I
agree. Yeah, I thought this was pretty cool.
Yeah, setting up the simple premise of what it is like yes, anyone could be watching this, and that's exactly what's going to be happening. So, it's a good time. From there, you get introduced to various characters throughout the film. You get introduced to her, of course, seeing the Watcher. Some of the other characters I'll just mention so when they pop up later, we know who we're talking about. There's kind of the neighbor, who turns out later to be a stripper, but she's like, she can speak English and she's nice to Julia on a number of occasions. She has a drink with her at one point. And it's kind of Julia's only real friend that she's kind of made by the time that the movie progresses any amount. Other than that, you've got like a couple of people that the husband Francis works with, who are constantly talking Romanian at a dinner party with her, despite the fact that they know that this alienates her. Like, they all know that she can't speak Romanian, and yet they keep slipping into Romanian left and right. Because at first I thought, oh, maybe this other guy's wife doesn't speak English, and that's why they have to kind of bounce back and forth. But then she started speaking English as well, and I thought, you're just being dicks then. Like, just speak in English.
Yeah. Just speak in English. It's not that hard. Come on.
I'm not saying I'm saying if you're at a party of 4 people and all 4 people speak English and only 3 people speak Romanian, I'm just saying it's impolite to not speak the language that all 4 of them can understand.
I think everyone in the world should have to speak English. I don't know if is that.
I feel like new listeners might think that you're being serious right now, and I'm always concerned that your weird sense of humor is going to turn the new people off. I can sense it. I hear it in your voice. I can hear the tone. You know.
I do. I always think the same thing. I'm like, people will know I'm kidding, right? Okay. Well, I'm too far into the sentence to not say it now. So.
There's very subtle adjustments in your tone that sort of give you a hint as to.
I'm like, oh well, that'll get canceled at some point, I'm sure.
Yes, but for what? That game of roulette goes on and on until it stops.
Yeah, it's for making fun of Deadpool, for not liking The Big Bang Theory. There's so many offenses.
I would rather cancel people for liking The Big Bang Theory, if I'm honest.
Sure. That's fair.
Is that what the next World War is going to be over? Is people who think Big Bang Theory is good and the people who don't?
I think an even better question is, do you think there's anyone out there that absolutely hates The Big Bang Theory? They think it's an awful show, but they love young Sheldon. Like, do you think there's anyone out there like that?
I mean, there's a lot of people on the planet. Like, there has to be one. It's very unlikely, though. Yeah, it has to be uber rare. That's a weird combination.
Yeah, Big Bang Theory, awful show, but young Sheldon, not too bad.
So to get back to Watcher. So I mean, obviously the main thing of the movie is like all of the little moments that she starts to, and this is the stuff where the movie shines, is when it's the visuals of just seeing the silhouette of this figure in the window.
That stuff is great.
Probably just watching her, right? And that happens a few times. She's starting to get really worried that she is being watched, and eventually she works up the courage to he's just looking around. He's not looking directly at me. So she holds up her hand as if she's waving, and she's relieved when nothing happens. But then when she turns away for a second, you just see the hand in the background go up.
Yeah,
like he was watching. It's a good moment.
It's such a great creepy moment, and then it has such a good callback later, like when he's given that, like big speech on the subway, like later on in the movie, and he recalls that moment. I was like, oh, so good.
Yeah, and then things escalate in a sort of a big set piece part of the movie, which is she kind of spends the days just wandering around and doing stuff, maybe buying things here or there, but for the most part she's just killing time. And she goes to the movies to see a really good movie, actually, Charade, starring Cary Grant. It's a good film.
Okay.
I recommend
Never
it.
seen it.
But she goes there, and there's only a few people in the theater, right? It's practically empty. And the guy sits down right behind, and always hides his face. Like, we don't get a good look at his face, probably until the supermarket stuff, when he's a bit more in the light, and we start to get a sense of what he looks like. But, like... Sorry,
I was just thinking, like, what if... instead of Charade, it was like Deadpool 2 that was playing at the theater.
Why have you decided that your running gags for this episode are Deadpool and Big Bang Theory? Like, what about...
that one I couldn't help, it just popped into my head. I was like like how like the scene would have been like so less tense. But yeah, no, I love how he is like portrayed through, I don't know what, like 3/4 of the movie or whatever, where he's just like always in silhouette, like you can never see him,
or a focus, like, or something. Yeah. He's always obscured in some way. Yeah,
it's always it's great. It's like just a very nice little bit of filmmaking where it just makes it like extra creepy and weird that this person's watching, but you can never really know who he is.
And this scene is very notable in how it's presented, because like when he sits down behind her, the shot is looking at her dead on, so we get the sense of like the shoulders behind her because he's a bit bigger or whatever maybe in the shot, but she's just kind of like ultra aware that this guy has chosen to sit right behind her even though the room is empty. And then he leans forward and like is breathing like right behind her head, like right down the back of her neck, and she just bolts, she just gets up and leaves, and that's it. Like, I'm done.
At any point while you're watching the movie, did it ever kind of remind you of It Follows a little bit? Like, just the idea of, kind of having like this one person, like obviously the story and stuff is, very different, but I don't know, maybe because it's Maika Monroe, like,
yeah, I don't think I did.
What I mostly know her from, but
yeah, I don't think I did, and I think you could make some sort of base comparisons to someone's watching, but I think the simple difference of him standing back and watching and not moving versus in It Follows, where the person who shows up is always walking, it's always this constant like unstoppable force that's just coming. Whereas this is someone who's like presumably playing mind games and wants to scare her and wants to like draw it out and whatever. Because she goes straight to the supermarket, and he comes in there, so we get like a kind of a game of cat and mouse where she realizes that it's him and that he's watching her, and she starts to sort of like walking past the aisles and sort of watching that he's doing the same thing at the other end. Just a nice little game, and to the point where she eventually sort of backs away and like smashes a bottle by accident and just runs into the staff only area in fear to hide. And he ends up like watching her through the little window in the door. He just sort of stands there and looks at her. But there's a lot of stuff where it's like when he steps out at the end of the aisle in the supermarket, where he just sort of slowly turns, almost like he's a robot or something. Like the way he just slowly turns and looks at her. I think at this point we'll talk about the fact that it's Gorman who's playing this character, who I've seen in a number of things. I think he first got kind of well known, at least in the UK, for Torchwood. And then he's been in Dark Knight Rises, he's been in Pacific Rim, he was in a season of The Expanse, so he's kind of popped up a lot in various things. And he's got a very specific face. He's got a very specific bone structure that makes his face stick out, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know if this is like a little insulting, but he's just like so perfect for this role. Like, talk about like the kind of people that you don't want watching you. Like, you look at his face, like, especially when he's just like being like dead serious and just staring at you. It's like, oh, that is not a face I want watching me. I
think you say that as if there's a single moment in this entire movie where he's not being dead serious.
That's sure, yeah.
He's always got a very, even when he's talking to her for that one scene where he kind of has a conversation. Because he doesn't even speak, because eventually when he calls the police on, because she calls the police on him, and the husband and the cop go over to talk to him. We don't see that, right? Because he doesn't see that. And when he comes back, he's ready to brush it off, and he's even the one that says like, hey, maybe the reason why he was watching you, because they go to the supermarket to watch the security camera footage, and he says, yeah, he could be staring at you in a creepy way, or maybe he's just staring at you because you're staring at him, because that's what it kind of looks like on the tape. And it's like, okay, right, so you're playing with this. But eventually, because she goes over and has it's the neighbor friend that she's made, her ex-boyfriend, she sort of runs into him in the hall, and it's at this point the neighbor's kind of disappeared, and obviously we suspect foul play. But she asks for his help because he's a big dude. He says, hey, can you come over and like knock on this guy's door so I can get a good look at him when the door opens? And no one answers at first, but then it's this old man, and it turns out later that this is actually Gorman, the Watcher's father, who he looks after. So it kind of looks like, oh, he's this guy who takes care of his old father.
He watches him.
He watches him. He watches after him. Yes.
Yeah.
But he actually brings the same cop back to their place, and the cop's like, hey, he's putting a complaint about you, and I remembered you putting a complaint about him. This is clearly some misunderstanding, so let's shake hands. And in fact, I love this moment because like he puts out his hand, and like it really just lingers. The shot just lingers on his hand as she's cool looking at it, going, "I don't want to touch his hand. I don't want to touch him." Not because she's being like a stupid kid who's like, "Ew, I'm not touching." Like, no, like this is the guy that she suspects is watching her and following her, because he's intending on either killing her or possibly sexually assaulting her, you know, whatever he's going to end up doing. This is like really tense, and obviously nothing's going to happen in this scene because the policeman's standing right there, the husband's standing right there, but it's this forced, like, no, accept that there's nothing happening here, and she has to sort of go through with it. But yeah, the handshake is like cringe. This is one of the better moments of the whole movie, I think.
Oh no, I thought it was great. And yeah, even though, like you're saying, you know nothing's gonna happen, it's still so tense because, yeah, like everything inside of you is like screaming, like, don't touch that like person's hand, like, you know, like it's like it you know, it's essentially, you know, it's like forcing you to, you know, like make up and actually, like, you know, be friends with this person that has done you wrong. And again, like, yeah, it does feel like a very typical kind of gaslighting thing, and where you have a bunch of guys that are like, you know, like, this woman's kind of crazy, talk about blowing things out of proportion, like, you know, this guy's real friendly, like, you know, they might as well be in, like, yeah, what, like, they might as well tell her to smile as well, like, yeah, why don't you smile at him, like, you know, shake his hand, like, you know, forcing a woman to, like, do this stuff that she doesn't need to do.
It's funny you say that, because at the start of the movie it's played off as like it's just a silly line that's kind of cutesy, but there's a moment where you know, like the landlady said, you know, does she like it here, or why doesn't she like it? And after she leaves, she says to the husband, oh, why did she think I didn't like the apartment? And he goes, oh, it's because you smile too much. And obviously he's being sarcastic because she's looked very serious the entire time. And obviously in the moment it kind of makes sense that, yeah, like she asked that because you look like you're really sad. But yeah, but you know, that whole, like, that very typical, you know, prickish thing that guys do where they say, oh, smile for me, baby, or whatever. Like, I think that's an intentional little seed that, you know, some of the themes we're playing with out here. And it's not that the husband's necessarily being awful. I mean, there is like one kind of really shitty thing he does in one scene, but for the most part, he's just like ignorant, and he's just not really taking it seriously. The policeman thinks he's got it worked out. He's not necessarily going out his way to be malicious. None of them are doing anything inherently or trying to be dicks about stuff. They're just like not comprehending and taking her seriously, because I think the whole point of this is to make you feel the way it feels if you're a woman who's not being believed when there's a serious threat. And I think a lot of this movie is that this could have been prevented if anyone really just took her seriously for a bit. If anyone really took her seriously and treated this like it was something, it would have probably saved the neighbor's life for a start. And you know, she wouldn't have been almost killed herself. And honestly, there was a moment at the end where I thought she had died. I thought they were ending this with
absolutely too.
She died because no one helped her, and that's the lesson of this movie. I thought there were, if anything, I was almost a little disappointed that she didn't, because I thought it was like a stronger message if she died.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. It ends in kind of a look that says "I told you so," which also kind of works in the context of the movie. But part of me almost thought, oh, this is more powerful if it's like a depressing ending where she could have been saved but wasn't because no one was willing to believe her. Yeah,
probably would have been more powerful, but also so much more of a bummer.
No, sure, yeah. So yeah, back to the handshake though. I think one of the things that you feel from it is that, you know, like, even though he isn't necessarily sexually assault his victims, because yeah, I mean, we know from the ending that he is the killer who's going around and doing this stuff. Like, even if it's not literal sexual assault, like, killers usually in some way like get off on what they're doing, right? You know, they need to do it and they feel something from it. So it's this idea of being asked to shake someone's hand who you very seriously suspect is going to internally be like getting off or aroused, or, you know, whatever way you want to phrase it. Like, he's getting satisfaction from this moment, right, of this handshake.
I mean, it seems like an absolute like power play, like, because I mean, there's no reason for him to, you know, have to go over there, like, but he, you know, it's clearly that he wants like to exert some power over her.
Yeah. And that's part of it as well, is that he's getting away with this. Like, he's been treated like he's equal as a victim as she is in the moment. When, you know, that's like kind of ridiculous. Like, so, you know, and you know, there's enough breadcrumbs that make you understand why the characters are acting the way they are. Like, yeah, she did technically have this big guy yell at an old man who's sick, and, you know, you can kind of spin that into this, right? You can kind of spin it, and the Watcher can spin that into like she's a threat. She's doing these things. She's threatening my father, who's this weak old man who can't take care of himself. Like, you know, she's a monster. Yeah. Do something about her. So, you know, the themes are there. The themes are clear, and you know, it's all good stuff. You know, she ends up following him at one point, which kind of backs up. In fact, I think that's before the policeman scene. Like, because it kind of lends more credence to what he's saying, is that she's kind of following him, because she sees him in the street and she follows him when he has lunch, and then follows him to where he works, which turns out to be the strip club that the neighbor works at. But there's a great moment where he catches her watching and like just sort of slowly turns and looks at her, and it's like, oh, so now he has this justifiable, like, oh, she followed me to work. Like, it's like, yeah, that sounds bad. It does sound bad, and you know, like, there's other people who'll admit that she was there. So obviously we know why she's doing it. She feels scared, she feels threatened, she's trying to figure out who he is. But you know, it's a big thing. Yeah, he even like frames someone else for some of the other murders. Like, there's like a suspect on TV that's mentioned.
Oh yeah.
There's the guy that because early on there's like the ambulance outside the previous crime scene, and Julia and the husband are walking past it, and they kind of, you know, mention that something's going on. But it all kind of keeps bubbling up, right? And there's scenes where, you know, she starts smoking again. She's sitting next to, like, she's got the curtains drawn, and she's just sort of peeking out the curtain looking for him to see if he's watching. There's a relatively effective dream sequence, which I didn't feel too cheapened by.
Oh yeah.
Mainly because I felt obvious that it was a dream because of the way it played out. But she, you know, she gets like the bag over her head from behind, and she wakes up afterwards. You know, things like that.
No, that was pretty good.
I think that's right before you hear some noises from the neighbours, and that's when she first starts suspecting that there's something happened to her.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's a very literal Chekhov's gun in this movie.
Oh yeah.
Because the neighbour, when she has her in for a drink, shows her that she's got a gun for protection in the drawer in her coffee table, and that of course comes up at the end, because it's her apartment where the attack finally happens. She finally goes in and finds the decapitated body of the neighbor, and that's when he makes his move. And you know, she when she tries to scream, the husband's in the next room thinking that he's been a dick and that she's going to leave him for it because the suitcase is lying out. She gets like part of her throat slit so she can't scream anymore, and she's crawling to the drawer, and we know the gun's in there. And then she just kind of like stops moving, and the killer lays down next to her and stares at her, and it's really creepy. And it's like, oh man, is he getting away with this? Is this going to be this big dramatic point that he is going to get away? And obviously the ending ends up being that when he leaves the neighbor's apartment, the husband sees him leaving and is about to confront him, thinking, wait a minute, have you actually done was this real? Have you actually done something to my wife? And just as maybe there's going to be a fight, or maybe the killer's going to like strike on him, just blam blam blam, gunshots. Like, she's got into the gun and shoots him, and the last moment's her looking at her husband with this look of effing told you. Like,
so I really love everything about this whole ending sequence. It feels very brutal. Like, you know, up until then the movie had been pretty, you know, there's a lot of tension and you know, like creepiness and stuff, but like here it gets really like gory and bloody. From
a slow burn of a movie for the most part.
Yeah, and then like, you know, and sometimes it's like, you know, sometimes like a slow burn, it's like you have to sit through a lot, and then you get an ending and it's just like, oh, that's it, that doesn't really justify this. Like this, I thought like is a good example of you know, while there were parts that were slow, I did think it does actually, you know, ramp up quite nicely, and then the ending really delivers. You know, from the decapitated head is like, you know, very gruesome, and then he's like, yeah, super like creepy and scary when he's like, you know, like grabbing her and, you know, kind of explaining his plan and everything. And then I was like really surprised when he slit her throat, because I feel like there's so many times in movies someone will have like a knife or a weapon up against someone's like head, and then all they have to do is like elbow him in the gut or stomp on his feet, and he's like, oh no, and then like, you know, loses his weapon and stuff. Like here it's like, oh no, he actually does like slit her throat, and it's not like he goes all the way through, but he still does it in a way where it's just like there's so much blood, and
it feels very intentional that he doesn't like kill her with like immediately. It feels intentional that he's only done it like part of the way because he knows how much to apply to stop her from screaming, but let it bleed out and let her kind of slowly die.
Yeah, and it's just so much blood, and like it's so like sad, like seeing her crawl like through there, and then and as she's like crawling and stuff, he's still doing his thing. He's just watching her.
And for the themes of the movie, the husband's in the bedroom in their apartment next door, freaking out that he's the wife's gone, and it's this metaphor for the whole movie is that it's literally happening right next door, and he's oblivious right now. He doesn't know that she's there. He doesn't know that she needs help. And he's starting to feel the panic of like the consequences of that. But like that metaphor is reiterated here. The themes are reiterated with this exact setup at the end where he is close enough to go and help, but he's just oblivious to it.
And then and it's such a good scene, like you were saying before, when she just stops moving and she's just lying on the floor, and then he like lies next to her, and it's like in like kind of like the very same position, so it almost looks like they're just like a complete circle. It's a really like I thought like a very pretty shot, and then also like super bloody, like blood is just like oozing out of her, but I just thought that like looked really cool.
Yeah, and the thing that sets all this off at the end is that he's got like a cocktail party to take her to, and he's chatting with the bosses and like the guy that she met earlier, and they're cracking jokes, and what sets her off, justifiably might I add, is that he basically cracks a couple of jokes at her expense in Romanian, and they all laugh it off, and she asked to know what they said, and they kind of try to like say no, like nothing. But the problem is that she's been trying to learn Romanian throughout the movie, and she picks up enough of a sentence that she kind of like pieces it together, and it turns out that he kind of made a joke about her, about how she's being really lonely, but at least she has the was it the spider they called the killer?
Yeah, I think it was something like that. Yeah.
At least you have the spider to keep you company. And obviously, this is a complete like he's being shitty. He's cracking jokes at her expense. She's already feeling excluded, like in the moment because they're all speaking Romanian in front of her, and she can't understand most of it. But now he's like cracking jokes and trying to get away with it. So she leaves and just goes to the subway to go home. She just gets on the train, and we get some really effective stuff here where, again, it's kind of that symmetrical thing where the watcher's like down the other end of the train but on the opposite side, so it kind of feels like in the reverse shot it's very similar to each other. But when the train like cuts power for a minute, and he just sort of slowly walks down, you hear the footsteps coming in until he's behind her, and then they sit down, and he acts very civil and talks about like the misunderstanding, as it were, and talks about I usually just go to the window, and I spend so much time looking after my father. I just look at people living their lives, and then this one day, this young beautiful woman like noticed me and waved at me, and I felt seen. And he's sort of like telling this tale, and it's like, But as he's saying this though, she's looking at the bag that he's got. He's got like a plastic bag. And it's kind of like the more she looks at it and the more we look at it, it's starting to look like there's a human head in there. You just sort of make out the nose and like parts of it. And he says he wants an apology because he's deserving of one, apparently. But this is all just sort of pushing her to the edge. And then this leads us into the final part where she ends up going to the neighbor's apartment. And
this was just such a great scene. Like the actor just really nailed it. Like he's so like creepy, and then just like as he's telling the story, it just feels like so off and unnerving, and really again you're just like screaming, because you just want like her to be as far away from this guy as possible. And it's like I mean, I don't think at any point in the movie you didn't think that, it was a misunderstanding or he was a creep or anything, but it's like, this just really nails like, or really like hammers home just like, just how like evil and like creepy he is.
And the
it's
fact
very
that
effective.
And he's definitely enjoying this scene. He's enjoying being able to like spin this tale and have complete power over without ever actually saying it. And then obviously he gets to act out later when he actually does attack her and grabs her and knocks her out and whatever. It's all about exerting his power. So there's so much of that kind of throughout, and because that's the thing is, when you think about how much screen time he actually has as an actor, it's not that much really, because so much of it's her thinking she's being watched and thinking she's being seen. But you see the odd silhouette or something, but it's not until the supermarket scene where you start to really get a proper look at him. Yeah. And then at that point, he's in a few key scenes, but he tends to walk in at the end of a scene and just look at her, as opposed to having a lot throughout a scene or anything like that.
Yeah,
and I think that absence of him until he appears makes him kind of scarier, I guess, or more of a presence when he does pop up.
Yeah, and then and again, like you were saying with the bag that he's carrying, like it does such a good job of it's just a very plain bag, but the way it's focusing on it, and as he's going in more and more into his story, it's like you're saying, you start to think all right, what's in that bag? Is it body parts or and then I guess the whole movie just kind of does a good job of it, where they show you something that could be one thing, but then the more you look at it, it's when you first see a silhouette in the window, it's okay, he could just be a guy just looking out his window, or he could be a guy who's watching me and is very sinister. I think it does a good job of kind of showing these everyday things that could potentially be really creepy.
Yeah, and that's another little seed that's at the start, because at the start of the movie, when they're in the taxi cab and he's talking to the taxi driver in Romanian, he says something about her, and it turns out he said that she was beautiful, and that kind of sets up this theme that kind of comes up again a couple of times in the movie. It's are you sure he's just not some guy with a crush on you who's looking at you sometimes at the window? And that's all it is. Yeah. A couple of people say that, so I think that's again tying into this, not only the gaslighting and not taken seriously, but specifically this idea, it's just someone who's got a crush or affectionate, it's harmless kind of thing.
You should be flattered. It's nice.
And a great little moment actually is after you think she's dead, where he's laying on the floor next to her. He gets back up, he's wiping blood off his hands and his knife, and he looks over, and there's a young girl, maybe a teenager, watching from across the street in a window.
Right, yeah.
And I thought this was actually a really great touch, especially with the ending. I guess this is actually maybe the reason why her getting up and shooting him does work as the ending. Aside from the told you so kind of moment of it, is this idea that this would have been his next victim. He would have had to have started going after her because she saw him.
That's true.
And maybe in the moment, because he says that to her at one point, then he says something like, what if you'd seen me doing what I do, or something. He says something like that. So maybe he actually is infatuated with this young woman now, or this young girl, because she's caught him in the act. So now he's going to be fixated on her. So it's this idea that the only way you save the next woman from going through the same thing is fighting back, kind of thing. So I think, obviously that's an ideal scenario, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you always can, but I think the end of this film, what's meant to feel good about it, other than she gets to tell her husband, I told you so, is that she was able to save the next victim from going through the same thing that she did. She was able to, like past victims of abuse or attack, or people who have been attacked or whatever, if you can maybe use that experience to help the next person from going through the same thing, you should. And I think that's what this ending kind of represents.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So,
also, one thing I did like about the ending too is, again, when he's getting shot, the apartment and stuff they're in, it's has these just really high ceilings, and when she fires the gun, you really hear it, it's so loud and echoes through the whole apartment building. I actually thought it was quite jarring, because I don't know, maybe you kind of get used to just the typical gunshot sound you hear in movies or whatever, but this one had such a loud booming echo and stuff. It felt I don't know, I thought it was a lot more visceral than other gunshot scenes in movies.
Yeah. And I think also is because it's a movie that doesn't have a lot of gunshots in it, so that first one that hits does feel quite a big shock, because it's not an action movie. This is not a Stallone movie where there's machine guns firing constantly around like that.
Yeah.
All the neighbors sort of come out, see what's happening, and see those gunshots and go back inside. And that's another thing in the movie, is that when she is freaking out about the neighbor being missing, and she asks the landlady to go in and check, and all the other neighbors that are near are all oh, why have we been woken up? What's all this banging on the door kind of thing? Again, it kind of feels like they're all just annoyed that she's making a fuss that this is seen as making trouble, rather than being concerned that maybe something is wrong, maybe there's a reason to be concerned about this missing person.
And then we find out later when he's like telling her that he actually was in the apartment when they had to bust in, like he was hiding in the closet.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So no, it's a lot of there's a lot of great moments in this, and I really like the themes that it's playing with. And I do think Maika Monroe is a solid lead actress. I don't think she's wise. It Follows is so great, but I think she does really well in the role. She fits
for sure.
it. Mm-hmm. And I think she fits this year as well. I don't know if it's just a case of having maybe a bit of a tighter script just to make it a bit more streamlined, or maybe just I don't know something else just to give it that extra spark that I just think it's missing. And at times I felt like I was appreciating it in a very clinical way, where I'm like, I see this working and I appreciate that because my analytical film brain is saying, yeah, this is good. But I wasn't necessarily feeling it all the time. Sometimes I was appreciating it from a distance rather than actually kind of like watching through a window. but I wasn't necessarily feeling the feeling it in my gut as I was watching it all the time. And I think that's why it doesn't feel complete home run or a success. I do think it shows a lot of potential in the director though, and this is her first
for sure.
feature length film. She's done some shorts. She's done like a short in one of the VHS movies and a few other short films. She's working on a movie called The Dating Game starring Anna Kendrick right now, according to IMDb. Not a horror movie, but she's going up in the world clearly, which is cool.
It's funny. I agree with that. Like, it's kind of interesting because as I was watching the movie, I feel like not that I hated it or anything, but that I was maybe a little more negative about it, or maybe a little more bored by it. But it's one of those cases where, as we're talking about it and focusing on like the really good scenes, like it's like building it up in my mind, going like, oh yeah, that was a really good scene, or like, oh yeah, that part was really cool. And it's like, it's just funny how that can kind of like cloud your judgment or whatever. Because like, if you take the movie on as just those really standout moments, like it's like that, those moments are really good. But like you're kind of saying, like as a whole though, it's not as as smooth a watch as some of those standout scenes.
Maybe it's a case of like if both Julia and her husband were just a little better written to be more fleshed out, maybe we'd be more engrossed by their the more drama elements of them like starting to like be split apart by this, and like him not believing and taking it seriously. I would say that maybe some of those scenes feel like it's going through the motions of this is just natural, but it has to happen because it's the point of the story, rather than feeling the gut wrench in the moment. Because it kind of works when he like says the joke in Romanian and she realizes that moment on its own works quite well. And I think if maybe more of the scenes had like kind of a gut punch that you felt for her when he wasn't taking her seriously, I think those scenes might have been elevated from that, and as a result the whole movie would be elevated. Is it that weird hour where they start running around and skidding across the floor and all sorts?
They have these little like two boxes, and one's on the top box and the other is like, I guess, trying to swat at it or something.
Very good. But yeah, so I do think there was improvements to be made, particularly maybe in the characters and the drama, just to like elevate the rest of it. But I do think the creepy moments are pretty effective and do a good job, and even them on their own build a lot to the themes that the films try to play with. I do think it does get across quite well, which is cool. So
I agree.
All right, well, in that case, Tim, what are you rating Watcher?
I think as I was like coming in, I think I was more like in a maybe like a 6.5 kind of range, but again, as we're talking about it and I'm thinking more about the parts that I like, it does elevate it a bit in my mind. So I think I'll give it a little bump and give it a 7. Again, definitely a slow burn movie, which is not a bad thing, but there were times where I felt it probably a little more than I should have, but it definitely has enough like standout moments that I think makes it worth a watch. And the the stuff that stands out, I guess, is elevates it more than, I guess, kind of deflates it for me. But yeah, definitely not a bad outing. And like you're saying, like yeah, I would be interested to see what this director does next. So yeah, not a bad movie at all.
Yeah, Chloe Okuno is the director in question. I don't know if we've said her name yet, so worth mentioning. Yeah, and she did actually adapt the story because it was well, she wrote a draft of the screenplay by the sounds of it. The kind of worded weird. Yeah, she's got a credit that says written for the screen by, and it says Zach Ford, and it says for him based on a screenplay by. So yeah, that's a bit of weird wording. So but I do think the directorial side is stronger than perhaps the writing is. Not that the writing's terrible. The writing's actually got a lot of good things in it. It's just that there's some elements that I think could be better. I
think you brought up a good point when you said it like is kind of clinical. Like I can see that.
Yeah, so I think I'll agree with the 7. I think it's good, and I think there's a lot of good things in it. I think there's some elements that aren't as good as the others, which stop it from kind of going beyond and above. And because of that, I did always have this kind of nagging feeling of it. I don't quite feel it in my gut like I'm supposed to, but I appreciate everything I'm seeing by and large. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there, but otherwise it is quite good. It is interesting though, because I won't say what it was, but I watched another horror film earlier today that I'll talk about in the next Even More Streams, which is one of the bonuses you can get over at patreon.com/MailPlusTV. It's a monthly show where we talk about all the horror films that we've been watching that we didn't do reviews for. But I think it's interesting that there was a few similar themes in that, and I think that was maybe a little better than this was, but still with some mixed elements. So it was an interesting pair to have back to back by accident. But yes, so yeah. But there you go. That is Watcher, and I have no idea. Well, I have a vague idea, but I don't know exactly when this is coming in the month of October and what came before and what's coming after. So I can't really tease what the next one is. But I will say yes, monthly, Even More Streams at the $5 tier over in patreon.com/MailPlusTV. There's also a bonus episode that you get as well at the $3 tier. So if you at the $5 tier, you get both. The bonus episode, of course, just been another movie review every month. So that's 2 stream-specific things plus early access you get. And of course, you get all those perks for the Atomic Cinema Experiment or sci-fi podcast that I do with Tara. And and there's a new show starting soon, The Collector's Cut, coming with me and David. Look out for that. Lots of things happening. So go and support us on Patreon if you want to, or you can hit the super thanks button below the video on YouTube, or of course you can support everything for free by liking, subscribing, dinging the bell, commenting, sharing us out, get us on Twitter at Streams Midnight, share the episodes out when we tweet things, or encourage your friends, whatever it may be.
Sneak into their iPhones and just go to that podcast app and subscribe.
Give us a shout out on your much more successful podcast.
Oh yes, please.
If you happen to be listening. So
do a little dance on your TikToks and have us playing in the background or whatever. I don't know. Yes,
all these things. Do any and all those things. All of it's wonderful. But thank you very much for joining us. We do always appreciate it. And then this was we did some sequels this month. We got 1 or 2 heavy hitters, 1 or 2 new releases. This was kind of a smaller, kind of like, okay, this is just an interesting pick because it's like we've heard some buzz, but it's not as big a name as some of the other ones. Don't worry, all the big names that came out recently are coming, and if not soon, then within the next few months when they hit VOD. We were plagued with different release dates for certain movies recently, and some other stuff. So, but yes, thank you very much once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.